What if the loudest goodbyes are spoken in absolute silence? My story doesn't begin with a shouting match or a slammed door, but with a dinner table meticulously set for two and a single heavy envelope that seemed to suck all the air from the room. Two crystalline glasses, two porcelain plates, two crisp linen napkins folded into precise, chilling triangles. In the center, a bouquet of peach roses leaned, their petals soft and muted, as if already mourning what was to come. Candles, tall and slender, guttered not for romance, but as a cruel timepiece. An hour melted into a shallow pool of wax. Then two. By the third, the wicks were drowning, their flames flickering weakly, mirroring the hope that was dying in me. Viviana Sterling, with her auburn hair meticulously styled and the sharp click of her heels announcing her arrival at precisely 9:47 p.m., swept through the entryway. Faint echoes of laughter still clung to the elegant lines of her silk coat. Her phone hummed a forgotten melody in her hand. She didn't register the scene immediately. Then her gaze landed on the dining table, her smile dissolving into a frozen tableau. Before her usual chair, where a ribbon-wrapped gift might have waited in past years, lay a single, heavy vellum envelope. My distinctive script traced her name across its front. There was no theatrical confrontation, no tired "we need to talk," just the stark white paper, the wilting roses, and my calculated, deliberate absence. She sank into the chair, her usually steady fingers trembling as they grazed the seal. Did she imagine it was a belated love note? A plea for forgiveness for an unanswered text from earlier? It was neither. By the second dense paragraph, her manicured hands flew to cover her mouth. By the fourth, her breathing grew shallow, ragged. By the sixth, her head snapped up, her eyes wide with a terror that suggested she'd encountered a specter. Because I hadn't simply suspected, I had amassed irrefutable proof. Every Tuesday rendezvous, each carefully itemized coffee receipt, the clandestine hotel reservation under her maiden name, Viviana Scott. And then the selfie of them, yes, and them, their smiling faces perfectly mirrored in the reflective lenses of a passerby's sunglasses. I hadn't just observed. I had meticulously cataloged, like a silent archivist filing away the ledger of her betrayals. The letter's final line was a cold, precise blade. It posed no questions, offered no desperate pleas. It simply stated, "You looked beautiful tonight, Viviana. I hope he noticed because I no longer do." That was the precise moment I walked away. She didn't pursue me. She couldn't. The truth etched in those words had finally pierced through her carefully constructed reality. How often do we miss the warnings until it's too late? I was never coming back. I didn't venture far that night. Just to the Sentinel, a dimly lit 24-hour diner perched on the desolate outskirts, where the clatter of cutlery was often louder than conversation, and the coffee tasted like a distant, bitter memory of caffeine. It wasn't flavor I craved. It was oblivion, a place to dissolve into the quiet humiliation of loving too deeply, too long. I stared at my phone, a useless brick in my hand, willing it to vibrate with some desperate plea, some hint of an apology. It stayed stubbornly dark. Not that night, not the next day, not the one after that either. The stark reality was, I didn't truly expect it. You see, Viviana, with her striking auburn hair and carefully tailored life, had always played the role of the misunderstood wife with a certain theatrical flair. When our life veered off course, she'd sigh, the weight of the world seemingly resting on her slender shoulders, and I, the perpetual fool, would rush to shoulder it for her. But this time, I had left the burden on that pristine dining table, beside her wilting peach roses. On the third day, an email arrived. Not a frantic call, not a remorseful text, but an actual email. It read with the detached formality of a corporate memo. "I received your letter. I believe we should discuss this. Please." That was the entirety of it. "No, I'm so sorry. No, I made an unforgivable mistake. No, your words shattered me. Just, I believe we should discuss this." As if we were negotiating the terms of a new office lease. I didn't respond. Instead, I began the meticulous process of packing, one drawer at a time, each item carefully selected, as if I were erasing my footprint from our shared existence without leaving a trace of disturbance. I took only the essentials: a few well-loved books, my laptop, a handful of clothes, and the framed photo of my old Rhodesian Ridgeback, Zeus, whom Viviana had always subtly disliked. By Friday, I had settled into Julian Lowe's guest room. Julian, an old colleague from my software development days, asked no probing questions. He simply pressed a spare key into my hand, draped a thick blanket over the armchair, and said, "Stay as long as you need." I needed more than just a place to sleep. I needed walls that didn't echo with the ghosts of forgotten moments every time I blinked. Viviana appeared the very next morning. The doorbell chimed once, then again, before she pounded on the door, her knuckles delivering a percussive argument. I watched from the upstairs window, sipping lukewarm herbal tea, observing her shift her weight, a picture of frustration, perhaps embarrassment, certainly both. But I remained still. I didn't descend. And then she did something truly unexpected. She sank onto the cold stone steps, sitting in silence for over an hour. Perhaps she hoped I would eventually emerge. Perhaps she simply forgot that I had, at long last, learned how not to. She returned the following morning. Same designer coat, same restless pacing. This time, however, she carried breakfast from the Morning Bloom, the quaint cafe she once declared, our place. A faint wisp of steam curled from the takeout bag, a pathetic peace offering, as if a gourmet breakfast sandwich could reassemble a shattered marriage. She lingered at the door even longer, clutching her phone, undoubtedly composing and deleting messages she never sent. At one point, a fleeting, almost whimsical smile touched her lips as she gazed at the doormat, as if it conjured a humorous memory. I didn't smile. I didn't even blink. Finally, she placed the bag gently on the doorstep, turned, and walked away. 10 minutes later, I discarded it, not out of spite, but because I simply couldn't consume anything she had chosen for me anymore. She used to know my order by heart. Now she barely knew who I was without me actively reminding her. The silence between us evolved into something almost tangible. It had weight pressing down on my chest when I tried to sleep. It reverberated in Julian's spare room, bouncing between my thoughts like an unwelcome voice I wasn't prepared to hear. I found myself caught in a loop. Was I angrier at her for her deception, or at myself for taking an agonizingly long time to truly acknowledge it? But hearing why, not from her, not yet, was a bridge too far. By day 5, her texts began. Initially a simple, "Can we talk?" Then more insistent, "You've got it all wrong, Merrick. Please, it wasn't what you think." But here's the unsettling truth. People don't accidentally weave months-long tapestries of lies. They don't simply forget anniversaries by chance, and they certainly don't maintain a second toothbrush at someone else's apartment without a very clear, deliberate intention. That last chilling detail had been woven into the evidence I'd enclosed in the letter. A grainy, clandestine shot taken from the rear of a parking lot, captured through the window of her car. She and the man, whose name I still hadn't bothered to learn, were laughing, their heads close, his arm draped casually around her. And there it was, tucked into her open purse as if it belonged, a toothbrush with a distinct blue handle, the very one that had vanished from our bathroom drawer weeks ago. I never mentioned it, not in person, not in the letter itself. I didn't have to. That particular detail was for her. I wanted her to read that line, see that photograph, and understand with gut-wrenching clarity that I knew everything. Not just the monumental betrayal, but the myriad smaller ones too. The thoughtless ones, the ones that screamed, "I've already moved on from you." When her next text arrived that night, declaring she was ready to explain everything, that I owed her a chance to speak, I stared at the message for a long time. Then I typed just 3 words, "Read the letter." I honestly didn't expect a reply to such a blunt instruction. For years, Viviana possessed an uncanny knack for gracefully sidestepping anything that caused her the slightest discomfort. It was her singular gift to navigate guilt with elegant ease, invariably turning the tables before you even realized you were no longer holding them. So when my phone buzzed again 2 hours later, and her message read, I did read it. Every word. I didn't think you'd ever see me like that. I felt nothing I could name. Relief? Satisfaction? No. To be brutally honest, I felt hollow, like finally opening a long-anticipated letter, only to find a blank page. She hadn't apologized, not once. She hadn't inquired about my well-being. She just wanted to know how I obtained the photos, how long I'd known, and why I hadn't confronted her sooner. That last part, that infuriating, "why didn't you say something," almost made me laugh. Not because it was remotely amusing, but because it was so painfully, archetypally Viviana. She expected me, as always, to clean up the mess she had made. Again. I responded with the truth. I hadn't said anything because I wanted to witness who she became when she believed no one was watching. And I did. I saw the real her. Not the polished version she presented to our friends. Not the woman who posted nostalgic vacation photos with captions like, "Forever my person," but the one who slipped into another man's car while wearing the exquisite silver necklace I'd given her for our 10th anniversary. The one who returned home smelling faintly of a cologne I didn't recognize. The one who, when I offered a goodnight kiss, instinctively leaned away without even registering it. She responded again, this time with a cascade of words, long, rambling paragraphs. Regret, meticulously disguised as justification. "I didn't plan it, Merrick. You were always so busy. I felt completely unseen." I read every single sentence. Then, without a moment's hesitation, I deleted them all without replying. Not because I was trying to be dramatic, but because I was profoundly exhausted, emotionally bankrupt. It felt as though I had spent so long holding the fragile edifice of our relationship aloft that when I finally let go, I simply lacked the strength to catch myself as I fell. The next morning, a call came from her sister, Phoebe Sterling. Phoebe was the only one in Viviana's family who had ever truly, authentically liked me. She didn't offer much detail, just that Viviana hadn't emerged from her room since reading my letter, that she'd skipped work for 2 days straight, that she had cried for 6 unrelenting hours. For a fleeting second, I felt an emotion I despised, guilt. But then I remembered. I remembered every flimsy excuse, every empty chair at our dinner table, every casual dismissal when she'd said, "You're overreacting," while her phone vibrated silently in the other room. No, I wasn't guilty. I was simply done. And for the first time in years, done felt remarkably like peace. 3 days slipped by without another word from her. I kept anticipating the next insistent knock, the next pleading message, the next excuse artfully disguised as profound introspection. But there was nothing. Viviana had always been the louder one in our relationship, effortlessly talking her way out of any consequence. This newfound silence was unsettling. It almost worried me until I reminded myself that silence isn't always surrender. Sometimes it's just meticulous calculation. I didn't trust her quiet, not for a single second. Then late Friday night, I received a voicemail. She must have called when she knew I wouldn't answer. I could discern the precise effort in her voice, that particular soft, rehearsed tone people adopt when they're attempting to sound utterly broken, yet still desperately in control. She claimed she was processing everything, that the letter had woken her up, and that she missed the man she used to love. That sentence landed like a shard of ice down my spine. It was the first time I fully understood. She didn't want me back. She wanted the version of me who allowed her to cheat without consequence. The Merrick who bought her extravagant birthday gifts even when she forgot mine. The Merrick who apologized for making her feel guilty while she lied to his face. She missed the man who willingly accepted far less than he deserved. What's truly hidden behind the words people choose? So I did something I hadn't anticipated. I drove back to the house, not to see her, not to engage in another futile conversation, but to retrieve the last item that truly mattered to me, my journal. It wasn't merely a notebook. It was the repository for everything I couldn't articulate aloud. Things I observed, fears I harbored, fragments of myself for which there was no space in our conversations. I had tucked it away behind an old, dusty box of tax files in the back of the closet. When I stepped inside, the place felt darker than I remembered, Not just in terms of lighting, but in its very mood, as if the house itself understood it had been tainted by something it could never scrub clean. She wasn't home. I didn't linger, but before I left, I saw something I've never been able to forget. On the dining table, precisely where I had left the roses, lay my envelope. Torn open, the letter inside folded and unfolded so many times that the creases had turned white with wear. Next to it was a photograph, one I hadn't included in my meticulous collection. An old snapshot of us from years ago. She must have found it in my study drawer. We were at the coast laughing, sun-kissed. Her arm was hooked through mine, a gesture that suggested she never wanted to let go. It felt almost cruel, seeing that moment of pure joy juxtaposed against the wreckage of everything else. And underneath the photo, scrawled in her familiar handwriting on a torn napkin, were four stark words. Was I always this? I stood there for a long time, staring, and for once, I had no answer. That night, after leaving the house, I didn't return to Julian's place. I just drove. Nowhere in particular, just along the winding back roads outside town, where the ancient trees leaned in like curious eavesdroppers. I kept replaying those four words she'd scribbled. Was I always this? It was haunting, not because it conveyed regret, but because it sounded like someone who genuinely had no idea of the answer. And perhaps that was the most terrifying realization of all, that she had become a stranger to herself long before she became one to me. I eventually parked outside an old bookstore that used to be our favorite haunt when we first moved in together. It had long since closed its doors, but the faded open sign still hung crooked in the window, as if patiently waiting for someone to believe in its possibility again. I sat there, gazing through the dusty glass, remembering how she used to rest her head on my shoulder, idly flipping through travel guides, murmuring, "Someday, Merrick, let's go everywhere." We never made it past Michigan. My phone screen flickered to life again. Viviana. I let it ring. Then a text arrived. I want to give you something. I didn't reply. I just stared at those words until the screen faded to black. I considered blocking her number. I truly did. But curiosity, I've discovered, has a perverse way of attaching itself to pain. Sometimes, you just want to see what else the person who broke you can still take. I know how pathetic that sounds. I hated myself for it. The next day, a package appeared on Julian's porch. No note, just a pale blue gift bag with my name written in neat black ink on the tag. I didn't open it immediately. I made coffee. I checked my email. I folded laundry that didn't truly need folding. Anything to defer the inevitable. Finally, I sat on the edge of the bed and opened it. Inside lay the watch I'd lost 2 years ago. My father's watch. I had questioned her about it back then, and she swore she hadn't seen it. Insisted it must have vanished during our last move. I had torn through every drawer, every box, ransacked the garage twice. I even shamefully accused the movers. But here it was, perfect, unscratched, ticking away as if nothing had ever happened. And suddenly the universe clicked into horrifying clarity. She hadn't just lied about another man. She had lied about everything. I held the watch in my hand and realized with a sickening lurch just how long I had been profoundly alone within my own marriage. How long I had desperately clung to fading memories while she had quietly, systematically erased the meaning behind every single one of them. I used to believe love could survive anything. Miscommunication, distance, even the relentless march of time. But it could not, I now understood, survive indifference. And indifference is precisely what she had offered me. One calculated lie at a time. I put the watch on. It still fit perfectly. But somehow it didn't feel like mine anymore. Just like she no longer did. 2 days passed without another delivery, another message, another knock on the door. And yet everything still felt incredibly loud. My thoughts wouldn't quiet. Every serene moment buzzed with replayed memories, twisted meanings, and questions that stubbornly refused to yield good answers. I kept wondering if she had planned to return the watch all along, or if she only gave it back now because the weight of her guilt had finally caught up. But the truth was, I didn't care about the watch anymore. Not really, it was simply another potent symbol of how much I'd lost without ever being explicitly told I was losing it. Then came the email with the subject line, "Please last one." I should have deleted it. I should have rolled my eyes and gone back to pretending I was utterly indifferent, but I didn't. I opened it. The body of the message was brief, just a request to meet at that small lake house her cousin used to rent out for summers. The one with the peeling white shutters and the rickety dock that groaned ominously if you stepped onto it too quickly. She wrote, "I'll leave the door unlocked. You don't have to say anything. Just read what I wrote and go." I stared at the screen for a long, agonizing time, torn between the insistent voice of common sense and that stubborn, fragile thread of curiosity still clinging to my ribs. I knew rationally that I shouldn't go, but I also knew, with an equally potent certainty, that if I didn't, I would spend the rest of my life wondering what she thought was important enough to write now. Are you ready for the final, brutal truth? So I went. It was early evening. The sky was dimming into that ethereal, golden gray hue that makes the world feel like it's holding its breath. The house looked exactly as I remembered it. A little older, perhaps a little more desolate. I stepped inside and it was quiet. Too quiet. Just the soft murmur of the wind off the lake and the faint, rhythmic creak of the dock outside. The letter lay on the coffee table. No envelope, no pretense, just my name scrawled at the top in her distinctive hand, in 10 pages of lined notebook paper beneath. 10 pages. I sat down and read every single word. She didn't beg. She didn't blame. She wrote about the beginning, about us, son. The early years, the small, tender moments she claimed she still replayed when sleep wouldn't come. She confessed to feeling invisible, irrelevant, like she was slowly aging into someone even she didn't recognize. She insisted the affair wasn't about him. Not truly. He was simply the first person who genuinely noticed her after years of feeling like decorative wallpaper. But buried between her elaborate explanations and her carefully worded regrets, there was a sentence that hollowed me out completely. "I wanted to tell you so many times, Merrick, but you always looked so proud of us, and I didn't want to ruin the only thing in my life that still looked beautiful from the outside." It wasn't remorse. It was pure, unadulterated damage control. She hadn't stayed because she loved me. She had stayed because she cherished the illusion of us-o. And when I shattered that illusion, she finally had nothing left to protect. I folded the pages, placed them back on the table, and stood. No words, no note in return. I locked the door behind me as I left. I didn't cry on the drive back. I didn't feel angry or victorious or even vindicated. I felt clean, as if, for the first time in years, I wasn't dragging around someone else's burdensome weight disguised as love. I drove with the windows down, letting the crisp autumn air buffet my face like it was rinsing away every last trace she had left behind. There was no need to look back. Nothing worth staring at anymore. I moved out of Julian's place a week later and signed a lease on a small apartment near the bookstore that had recently reopened under new owners. Funny enough, it looks almost exactly as it used to. Same creaky floors, same mismatched chairs, same sleepy ginger cat curled up in the window display. But it feels different now. Or perhaps I do. Viviana never wrote again. No calls, no messages, just an enduring silence. And that's perfectly fine. We had spoken enough without ever truly listening. I don't harbor hatred for her. I don't wish her pain. I just hope, with genuine sincerity, that someday she becomes someone she doesn't have to apologize for. And I hope I never again settle for being someone's background. These days, I go for long walks without constantly checking the time. I eat when hunger calls, sleep when tiredness overtakes me, and I write letters I don't ever have to send. I even bought myself a new watch, not to replace the old one, but as a constant, quiet reminder that my time is mine again, fully, freely. A few nights ago, I was sitting at the Sentinel, that same diner from the beginning, the one with the notoriously awful coffee, and I caught myself smiling. Not because life is suddenly perfect, not even close, but because I finally feel like I'm living my story again. Not hers, not ours, mine. And that finally is enough.